humane story. If you listen to the sheriff's department about what was going on, it was, I don't know how you could look at that narrative that was coming out of the mainstream press through the authority structure of the sheriff's department and contrast that with the voices of the people that were there and not come to an understanding that we need to change what's going on in North Dakota. But my motivation for going there was I was watching Unicorn Riot live feed, independent video, and actually hearing those voices. If I turned on CNN or ABC or CBS, they just turned it into a he said, she said.
That thing where they like
fight.
say the same script on every single news platform.
That one.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's feeling the wall coming down or whatever it was.
Right. Well, they have these they have the narratives, the crafted narrative.
Right.
And the crafted narrative,
which gives people the soundbite that they all repeat to each other, and then people feel like they're informed because they hear the perspective that they have coming out of somebody else's mouth, but that's because everybody's being given the exact same soundbite about a very complex issue.
So I went out there to find out what was going on for myself, and we were sent there by this community. Because I wanted to know what was going on. It was right after the North Camp had been taken down. It was one of the first big skirmishes that had happened there, and that was news. That was news, but it wasn't. I thought it was news, but it wasn't. I didn't see it on any of the news channels, what was going on. And so when I did my radio show that night, I talked about what I had seen on the live streams, the independent live streams, and people literally came to the radio station with money, and people said, we want you guys go out there and tell us what's going on. And so 3 of us from a small independent radio station went out there, and the station manager made an audio recording of his experience that got picked up by Pacifica Radio and was put in the library of 300 different radio stations. And one of the ladies that traveled with us was able to write a narrative because we had 2 people who were with us that were on the bridge of the Backwater Bridge at 4:00 in the morning when the young lady had her arm blown apart by the sheriff's department concussion grenade. And then all the newspapers were like, well, somebody said it was a grenade. Somebody said it was an improvised bomb. But we actually had a witness. And that was just because the town said, go tell us what happened. We went, we stayed, we reported what we saw, and we were able to change the narrative in a chain newspaper like the Montana Standard, which is a part of a big chain of newspapers. They actually printed the article that was in conflict with the sheriff's and the mainstream media's story. So to me, that was encouraging. That showed me the power of actually people getting involved and going out and participating in these things that are going on.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting, the difference between Al Jazeera and some of the independents that came out were, it showed some fortitude in reporting. I think the Guardian, I think was another one that, and of course some of the Indian papers, Native American papers were really, really good on getting some of the word out. But I think the important part of this is that no matter how bad the reporting was from CNN and FBI and IBM and CIA and all those, the word still got out.
Thank you, Internet.
And the truth did get out. And that in itself is another learning experience of what we have to do. I look at it's on the subject and not on the subject, but I look at what happened in Syria and what's happening in Syria and how everybody was, oh, I'm such a big deal because I helped with the online start of the revolution in Syria. Well, yeah, but I don't see any of those goddamn people that claimed that helping them out now. That it's all gone bad. So what is our responsibility to that, and what's our responsibility to, once we get things going, do we just drop it later when we need to go back and play on our Wii? Or do we have the responsibility to follow through on this stuff?
Well,
and what are we going to do about climate change when the rest of the shit's just going to collapse all around us, no matter what we do? You were asking me what I do. Well, I do a lot of things. I do human rights, native rights, environmental justice, labor. I work on a lot of things, but honestly, right now, I'm working on trying to prevent climate collapse. And I'm doing that by working on the labor issues of climate collapse, the human rights issues of climate collapse, the environmental issues of climate collapse, and the educational issues, the economic issues of climate collapse. So I'm kind of still doing all the things I did, but probably with more of a point on it that if we don't do this, we're all going to die.
We posted a link to the Thin Green Line. Can you tell us a little bit about what that website is and what's going on with that?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing a movie too, a documentary, but which we've got started. But awesome. The Thin Green Line is people online is an extraordinary thing. It's an online historical archive. So you can get on there and you can see like anything about divestment and reinvestment. And I say that we've still got more to do. And this is a living document. So, it's going to be added to and added to and added to. But you can also get on there and see all the testimonies that were done for all of these fossil fuel fights in the Northwest in the last 20 years or so. You can get on there and you can see documentation. You can get on there and see the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission documents, and you can see the state, city, county stuff. You can see any legislation that's been passed regarding fossil fuels. You can get on there and see, and everybody should get on there and see the interviews that we've done with activists in the Northwest. I think they're really, really important because, again, it stresses that, I didn't put a lot of the scientists and stuff on there. We have those and they're available, but I want people to see that the people that are on there that I interviewed are just like you and me and the guy down the street and everybody else that finally just realized that things were going that were wrong, they were illegal, they were immoral, or that we're all going to die if we don't do something, and decided to do something about it and realized that they are powerful, and after a while realized that they are powerful and they are able to change the face of the world. So, and there's other things on there about Canoe Journey. There's other things about Kai Activism. There's other things on there about, so it's just a gold mine for activists and organizers.
What is Kai Activism? Did you just say Kai Activism?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
In a lot of these events, we've actually, there's been flotillas go out, and a lot of them are kayaks.
Oh, literal kayaktivism.
Yes, kayaktivism, which is, they've actually went out and stopped like things coming down the rivers.
Oh, like people sitting in front of bulldozers.
Yeah,
on the river.
Yeah. And just making, people knowledgeable about things from the water, because
awesome.
it's a different view from the water. It's a different view to the water, and it's all about the water. It's all about the water. That everything we're talking about, is all about the water, and people need to start considering that we live in watersheds and not these boundaries that and borders that people make up and change every couple of weeks whenever it suits them, and that water is life, and it's the most important aspect. We're 90% water, and we only borrow it for a minute, and that we're going to die if we don't do something.
I like that. We're 90% water and we only borrow it for a minute.
Yeah, and then we get some more.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Hopefully.
Until we run out, and that's happening. So, but this site, this Thin Green Line, I think is an extraordinary document an extraordinary thing for people, and it's going to be even bigger and better as it's added to, and I'm just really super happy to have been involved with it. It's extraordinary.
Can I ask you a personal question? A challenging.
No. Yes.
Can I ask you a question that is challenging to ask because it seems overly personal, and I don't want to just make you my.
Is it about him clicking the pin?
No, no. What do you call it? Because I know the word deconstruction is the word for what you're doing when you're slowly pulling the shreds of an invasive religion out of your mind. That's called deconstruction. I know that intersectionality is sort of one of the positive terms when it comes to being racially minded and inclusive across various topics. I don't really know what the word is for slowly pulling the shreds of racism out of your mind. But as I've been doing that, I had the weirdest experience because I've known for a few years now that the North America was already completely inhabited by millions and millions and millions of people. I didn't know that for the first 28 years of my life,
Right.
but I've known that for a few years now, and every so often I'll share a map of North America, and I actually made it my campaign because of that and because of other issues to start calling the U.S. and citizens U.S. citizens, not Americans or America, because there are a lot of countries on these two continents. But there's a difference between knowing something and internalizing something. And I had the experience the other week where I was sitting in a coffee shop in Bozeman, and this native father and son walked in and ordered their coffees, and then they were just standing there waiting for their coffees. And I just was struck. I almost want to get up out of my chair and go walk up to these guys and be like, hey, I'm so sorry that I'm living here. And thank you. I don't even know what I would say, but I just had this gut feeling that I wouldn't be embarrassed at all if I just suddenly decided to do that to every Native person that I saw. Any Native person that I ran into or encountered was if some Native person was checking me out at the grocery store, checking out my groceries, I'd be like, here's your change. I'd be like, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry that I'm living on your land, and thank you, or something
So how do you show solidarity?
God,
And
just acknowledging, because
Right.
watching the father and son sit there silently, stand there and wait for their coffees, and I think I had this empathetic whoosh of my soul getting sucked into their experience briefly, of them feeling like an outsider in their own goddamn living room. We're in their living room, but they're the ones that feel like they're an outsider in their living room. Even though I have a lot of
there's things we can do, and that alliance I was talking about earlier is something, and we can kind of get back to the reparations in this. A lot of the land should be given back. National forest land, these army bases, I think actually those army bases are supposed to go back to the natives wherever they are when those forts shut down.
Native American
that was a part of a lot of the treaties.
National forest given back, as in Native people could go live there now.
Take them over, yeah, whatever they want to do with it.
Manage it.
Yeah, and some of that they're doing the management, and the only reason we have any salmon left at all really is because of the Bolt decision and the natives having the power to help dictate what happens to those salmon, and that the federal government has a responsibility to make sure that those salmon are available for those tribes to eat.
Wow.
So there's things like the CRITFIC, the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, that really is important in making sure that is done. There's the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians. There's all these things that really make a difference on trying to do the right thing, environmentally and economically and so on and so forth. And honestly, if you're graduating from a university or something and you're going to be a biologist or fish enhancement person or actually, if you're going into hotel motel or a lot of these other things, you're going to work for a tribe. You're probably not going to go work for the state or the federal. You're probably going to go to work for a tribe. And they're really the ones doing the largest part of the reclamation projects and making sure that those get done, like the culvert replacements in Washington and so on and so forth. So, but there's also this, another thing you might do is there's the land grant university. You know what a land grant university is? Okay. Back in the day, probably 140 years ago, whatever, they started taking Indian land and giving it to universities. And that land didn't have to be wherever that university was. It could be, something in New England that was they gave them some land in California or wherever.
Okay.
Same as they did to, the railroads, they just gave them land, timberland and all that to make money off of and take timber and coal and whatever off of. But we call those land grant universities. So the money from those lands financed those universities. Now we call them land grab universities.
Right.
Yeah.
And for instance, Washington State University still has a lot of those original lands.
And they're making money off of it.
They're still making at least $4.5 million or more a year off of those. So I want them to take that $4.5 million, and I want them to dedicate that strictly to Native American education.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Keep the land, but all of that money goes towards the Native youth.
Well, no, I think they ought to start giving the land back to the tribes that originally had them.
So they could be managing it themselves.
But until that time, that amount or some amount needs to be going to hiring Native teachers, to making Native curriculum. But the $4.5 million ought to go to scholarships for natives to go to school. Period. The rest of it they should pay for out of their own goddamn pocket.
But what about just me, Robin?
Yeah, you're talking about institutions.
Well, you can help us do that. You can put pressure on those universities to do the right thing. When you show up, when these people, we had a thing down here in Vancouver.
But what about in my daily life?
Okay, one thing that everybody should do is in everything they do, whether it's going to brush your teeth, thinking about buying a computer or a car or going somewhere or whatever, just start thinking about how it affects water.
Okay.
And I know that sounds crazy.
No.
But I have kids that come up to me 2 or 3 years later and go, my God, I thought you were crazy. Well, you are, but I understand what you were talking about. I finally get it, that when you are doing the right thing for water, you're doing the right thing for your neighbor. Yeah. You're doing the right thing for Indians. You're doing the right thing for another country. You're doing the right thing for your community.
Descendants.
You're doing the right thing for that seventh generation and beyond. So, but it's more than that. It's that mindset that gets you out of that Judeo-Christian, we own this shit and we get to do whatever we want because I'm American and all that.
Because God made me special.
I get to do everything I want because it's me. You don't, because you're water. And you need to start treating yourself well.
Oof.
And remind yourself that you're water.
Well, to zoom out.
Go
Thank you.
So that's one thing you can do. And I think if you start changing that mindset, then you're going to find other ways just by default of how to help us. But, when we are trying to, the Chinook tribe, Chinook Nation in Washington here is trying to get their recognition, their federal recognition, so that they can be on par with the federal government and they can get medical and they can get some of the things they need. Maybe they can get some land that they should be having. Mm-hmm. There's other tribes that are trying to get re-recognized after they were dumped and politically crapped on. There are, in Portland, the 7th largest Native community, it was only 2 or 3 years ago, we finally got a dental clinic.
Wow.
Which only does the most basic. Our
Right.
medical facilities only does the very basic. We depend on the largesse of others to, if you need a specialist or whatever, that, or you need x-rays or labs or something, you can get them from doctors that'll do that. And maybe the government will give them a little money for it or something.
Gotcha.
But there's a lot of things you can do on a day-to-day basis. And another thing is, making sure that Title VI Indian education is being done in your school systems. It's a federally mandated program that has money in it, but a lot of the school systems are ignoring that.
What's that called
and
again?
refusing to do it. Title VI Indian education.
I'd never heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
When you were taking care of the dogs, that's what he said they just passed in Oregon and Washington?
No, that's STI, since time immemorial. Since time immemorial is the mandatory teaching of Native history in the school systems. The Title VI is part of the 1965 Civil Rights Act that demands that cultural education be provided for Native kids in school systems.
According to the U.S. Department of Education, the purpose of the Title VI Indian Education Formula Grant is to support the efforts of local education agencies, Indian tribes and organizations, post-secondary institutions, and other entities to meet the unique educational and culturally related academic needs of American Indian and Alaska Native students, such that students can meet the same challenging state something. It's sort of like No Child Left Behind, specifically for Native Americans?
Well, not exactly.
Okay, this is a bad summary then.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, that's kind of what the law says. But it's to help, particularly Native kids culturally, because they're put at a cultural disadvantage in school systems. Right, if you want to put it in a nutshell. So, but that, those are some of the things you can do. There's also, write your representatives and say, look, do the right thing by these tribes and quit screwing around. Make medical care available, not this crap that we have. And don't get me wrong, the people in the Indian Health Service that are doing the work, oh my God.
Individual healthcare providers.
The individuals are just mostly extraordinary people that are really trying to do the best they can with absolutely nothing.
Right.
But, that should have been fine. There should be no question that stuff is financed. We shouldn't be having hovels of schools on reservations.
Oof.
We should be, we should, these things were just medical. People shouldn't be dying right and left of medical issues on reservations, or in urban communities because they can't get the help they need. There are just so many things that you can do, and start going and asking. Ask a Native community in your area what help they need politically. Help them get natives elected to office. I've got a thing that's been trying to start here for a long time. It's called Native Access to Democracy. And part of that is that, on your local Democrat, whether it's the county Democrats or the legislative districts or the congressional districts, there ought to be one Indian on all of those executive boards in an at-large position. You ought to be training Indians to be precinct committee officers, how to get elected, to, how the system works, what the system is, that education of how to get elected, and then helping them get elected. You should be giving them money to go to the county and the state conventions. You should be able to give them money to join the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Commission, and go to all these other transportation meetings and all those other things that all the white folk, the rich white folk, particularly the old retired rich white folk, get to go to, but those Indians don't. So make that democracy available to them. We're just in Washington getting drop ballot boxes on some of our reservations for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
So, we weren't really allowed to vote for a long time. We were supposedly citizens. Yeah, it's deceptive. So, we need to partake in that. When people tell me that, oh, well, I don't want to vote because then, it doesn't count or this, that. Well, that's fine for you. But if you're not voting and if you're not helping me, you're my enemy. Because my people are dying every day. My people are suffering from things they shouldn't be suffering from. So I have to deal with whoever is in power.
You have to use that system.
Whether I like it or not isn't the point. I hate it. It pisses me off. It's drudgery. But it's something that I've had to do, something I've had to learn, and something that I need to make sure that it's easier for people to do in the future. And that's something you can definitely do because you have the power to do that.
Well, I think it'd be encouraging to hear your perspective of having done that for years and years, being a part of your life's work. Do you feel encouraged by the work that you've been doing? Do you feel like that there is movement? Do you feel like you can encourage other people because of your own victories in doing these things?
Well, I don't consider them my victories. I consider them our victories.
Well, your efforts.
But
do you feel as though your efforts are producing fruit?
Because I want to zoom out just a little bit, because one thing that Ainsley brought to my attention was that you and I are of a different generation than she is, and many people who are listening to our show, and that we were raised with local issues and personal issues and state issues, whereas the kids today are aware of every goddamn thing going on the planet.
That's good, because water doesn't stay in one place.
Right. Every travesty, every economic problem, every ecological problem,
every instance of abuse.
And so they're aware of all the problems, and it can be overwhelming to feel like you can do anything, because to start working on something that you feel like you can have an effect on when you are constantly being inundated with this tsunami of tragedy. We're talking about climate crisis.
So
this is something that's only going to increase. How do you let people know that focusing on something makes a difference when you're
how the heck do you choose? Like, how the heck do I choose which thing I'm going to focus on unless I have like some actual heartstring tug? Like for me, if I were to follow my heart, I would probably be working on the abuses being enacted upon children who are in cages on U.S. soil at the U.S.-Mexican border. Like right. I would but that would be like me picking one thing, but also like I have local issues. I have local people that I care about. I have my 6 younger siblings that I'm still trying to take care of from several thousand miles away. I have friends and loved ones, and I have things in my town and in my own self. And then I'm also aware about the sea turtles and the Great Barrier Reef and Syria and France and what's going on in Alaska and the dogs being abused and cats' nails being clipped off and the environment and native rights and black people. Like, it's like... You're like, well, just go to your legislature. I'm like, so does that mean I, Ainsley, go to my calendar and say, okay, on Mondays, I'm going to go to my legislature about native rights. On Tuesdays, I'm going to go to my legislature about black people rights. On Wednesdays, I'm going to go to my legislature about the kids at the border. On Thursdays, I'll go talk to them about local environmental issues. And on Fridays, I'll do a little bit of self-care. Like, yes. How the fuck do we do it?
Yeah, that's exactly how you do it.
That's a lot to ask people. And I don't even fucking have kids. I don't have kids.
Well, so there's
and I
two
still
things.
have a hard time putting all of my
Ainsley
dishes in the dishwasher.
What Ainsley said about you and your ilk, your young, smart people.
What?
I thought I'd just see if you were paying attention.
No, growing up with access to the internet versus growing up without access to the internet.
Right. You do see a bigger picture, and that's good. And I think it's important because part of the way that the corporatocracy works is that they parcel us out and keep us in those little silos that make us powerless to do everything against that. They'll even give us money. They will give us money to fight certain things and put out certain fires. And you got to put out the fires because they're fires. Then that's all those individual things you were talking about. Mm-hmm. But at some point, you've got to take part of your time, part of your money, part of your efforts, and go after the arsonist. So in this case, right now, and for my scenario, the most important thing is fighting the corporatocracy on fossil fuels, because it's the most urgent, because it's killing the water and it's killing the air, which is the same thing, by the way. The air is just the pump that gets it up, start over again.
Right.
But if you take part of that and everybody works on that larger issue, then you can make headway. Other than that, take those things that they're most affecting you and that you think that you can make the biggest difference on, and work on those. But make sure to take your time to do those other things and be helpful to people when they're working on other aspects of what you need. And you can do that by making sure that you're voting, and that not only are you keeping your electeds' feet to the fire, but your responsibility to those electeds after you elect them to help them do things. Are you going to the legislature and testifying or giving them information they need to make the right decisions? Otherwise, that corporatocracy is going to send their lobbyists in there, and they will do that work.
Well, I think
so. Are you taking your responsibility to at least do those things and give them the power to do that? Are you helping those other people who are doing things in your community to get them done? That is, we're not asking you to do everything. We're asking you to do something and to continue to do something, and just try and do the best you can. And you can come out here to Ecotone's art and retreat center, and we will have special classes for organizers and activists so that their heads don't explode.
Yeah,
nice.
I want to talk to you about that. It looks like we're maybe got 15 minutes left.
We're getting towards the end of the show. I want to take it back to the reparations question briefly, because Norm Goodwin wanted to know if you know anything about whether or not Canada is doing any reparations for the native land that the French stole.
Yeah, and he's asking, you can see the comment thread there. Norm is asking, he's only asking if
Canada
there's
seems
things
like
that we can learn to do or not do.
Canada kind of seems like they are doing like a little better job than the U.S. in a lot of realms. So, like, is Canada doing a better job with reparations in some kind of way? Do you know about?
There's talk and there's a lot of smoke. I'm not sure how much fire there is up there.
Yeah.
They're another corporatocracy-driven colonial rule place. I mean, both by French and English. So the history is really no different than it is here. And on the surface, they try and they talk a good story, but they're still not. They still haven't done everything they need to do to rectify what they did with their schools, with the native schools, or with the taking of Indian lands, or now including those natives in consultation on these large energy projects, pipelines, uranium mining, gold, diamond, whatever. They're doing a piss poor job of that too. So, are they doing something? Well, they're talking about it.
Okay.
Are the natives up there satisfied? I don't think so.
But the U.S. is almost like further along with reparations than Canada is, weirdly?
No.
I
don't think either of them are anywhere near where they need to be on reparations.
Gotcha.
We haven't even really begun that discussion to any great length in either country.
Yeah. To say it to folks who are not involved in the struggle or not involved in these issues, to even mention the idea of reparations, like I said,
repatriation.
Well,
Because reparation is like the whole thing.
Reparation and repatriation.
Right.
we're just
Either one of
getting
them
we're
is
just
a
getting
blank
people to
look.
understand that we're not minorities.
Mm.
Indians aren't minorities. Everybody else in this country is minorities. Even though there's less of us, we're not minorities. We were the first people here.
Right.
The rest of everybody is minorities. Legally, in treaty and sovereignty issues, we are not minorities. We are the first people. We are countries here. We're not minorities. We're countries and peoples of those countries, of those nations.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to get that squared away first
That's a
before we start talking
mentality
about
shift.
reparations.
Yeah, that's a shift for sure that needs to happen.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you've got going on there in Vancouver? You just mentioned that you're building something.
Well, so it's just kind of outside of Vancouver, up in Ariel, Washington, and I'm building an art and retreat center. So we're going to have visiting artists here. Ultimately, what I'd like to do is make sure that this is free to particularly Native kids and maybe Natives in general when they come here to do either retreats or art, to learn about art and do art. So we'll have
That sounds
people
so
from all over.
exciting.
What's the
It
name?
really is. And
What's the name
we'll
of the
have
place?
people of all different art, from different practices, whether it's painting, glass, ceramics, metal art, sculpture. We'll be making paper here, so on and so forth. And we'll also film all that so that we can send that to particularly rural and reservation areas where they don't have access to internet.
Mm.
And then we'll do it online too. So if they do have access, they can be involved in it. And we'll probably have places for kids to stay here when they're here.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly we're going to have people from overseas. Later on, we're going to be having some international indigenous people exchange programs, indigenous
Neat.
artist exchange programs.
Yeah.
And then, seriously, for a lot of activists and organizers need places to go have retreats and learn things and figure stuff out and maybe do some mental health work because,
Yeah.
Ainsley, it is tough. It's extraordinarily hard to realize what's going on in the world and to feel so inadequate to the task. But I want to tell you, Ainsley, how powerful you are. And the fact that you're sitting here asking these questions, you're doing something that needs to be done. I do radio stuff and video stuff as well. And I think it's extraordinarily important part of what we do is getting that message out and making sure that people understand what's going on. So don't say that you're not doing anything and don't be overwhelmed because that every part that you do is important to everybody and surely important to me. And I appreciate you for it. Yeah.
What's the name
giving
of
you a
the
digital hug?
Yeah, what's the name of the retreat that you're talking about?
I have no idea yet.
Oh, it hasn't got a name yet.
No.
I'm looking forward. You've talked to me about some of the plans that you have going out there. I'm really looking forward. Ainsley and I are looking forward to making a trip out there. Maybe in June. We have our sort of calendar booked up through the next this month and the next month, but maybe in June we can make a journey out there. My daughter is an artist in Portland,
things.
and I would like to get her out and throw our shoulder into some projects out there and see. I'd like to see this thing have a name and move into the world.
I just usually find that these things take on their own name as they go.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I didn't want to push it since
You're not
it
going to be
wasn't.
prescriptive.
Yeah, absolutely. And then have to live up to that.
Right.
Roben, thank you so much for joining us this evening for the last couple of hours.
Well, thank you. I don't think I imparted any great wisdom, but that was sure nice talking to you. And I always enjoy what you folks do. And I think it's important that you do it.
Thanks.
Um,
Maybe it
we
doesn't
need
feel
to
like
do-
great wisdom to you because you're just used to it.
Well, I don't know about that, but it is important for us to do. And I want you guys to get out here and do some art and do some, we've got good internet here. You can start doing some shows from
Live
here.
broadcast from the
Yeah.
unnamed art retreat.
Yes, from No Name Art Retreat.
Yeah.
and super double secret art retreat.
Yeah.
Only,
But we'll try and get you on some of the local radio stations here too, and
that'll be awesome.
that I work with. And
Well, we're just trying to have some conversations across lines that normally we're conversations are not having, and this is important. Just to have the conversation is to be communicating across space and time, and we appreciate you being our guinea pig on our first ever Zoom conversation.
We did have some frame rate drop.
Yeah.
Because of
The
my
Zoom thing.
my CPU is like, this is maybe too much for me all at once. So I'm going to set it up differently next week, and I anticipate not having any dropped frames. But we do have a complete audio recording that we'll be posting later.
Right.
well, I'd love to come back anytime. It'd be great.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
We'll keep you in our lineup.
And we have this is being broadcast on Facebook if you're watching it there, but we're also broadcasting this on YouTube and Twitch.
Which are usually
And
the better quality videos.
Those channels have better quality videos. I'm posting a link to our YouTube page. If anybody's watching this, you can go to the YouTube page and help build our channel. We haven't been promoting that yet, but now that we're moving into season 2, we're looking forward to having more conversations with more folks across the globe now that we have the capacity to do that. And yes, you're our first Zoom guest.
It's true.
And we appreciate you helping us try out the gear, and we look forward to you coming back at
Terry
and
says
doing
he's
it
a
again.
very interesting guy.
Yeah, Terry
Oh,
thinks
well,
you're
thank
very
you.
interesting.
Yeah, and next time maybe we can talk about some of the other projects we're working on, like food system
Absolutely.
justice action research,
Yes.
and some other native programs we have going, and trying to get an elder in residence program going at Washington State University,
That's awesome.
Vancouver, and working on, like I say, everybody needs to get on the Chinook Nation website, and there's a form letter on there they can use or whatever, and write your congressman, your U.S. congressmen and senators, and tell them to do the right thing and make it right by them. And there's other tribes that are trying to get their recognition back. That is something that just is criminal and needs to be taken care of.
I will put that in our chat as well. And yeah, we should come back and have another conversation about other things. Next week, we're going to be talking about the amygdala hijack, which is what happens when you experience so much chronic or acute trauma that you live in a state of fear and can no longer be in control of your reactions, even if you think you're in control of your reactions. So
Dealing
You mean like being an Indian?
exactly. Not saying that people who are experiencing this kind of trauma or amygdala hijacking are out of control, but learning to be aware of how trauma affects our abilities to make clear choices because of our trauma responses.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
Thank you so much, Robin.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Let's do this ongoingly.
Yes.
And appreciate you coming on tonight, and I appreciate everybody who was here for the show. I know often more people are listening since we haven't established our time and time.
A lot of people
that we're
watch
doing
the
this.
shows after the fact.
A lot of people are watching the shows after the fact, so thanks for everybody in the future that is watching the show. And I also made I reposted the link to the Thin Green Line is People website, so people can watch some videos and see what kind of work that you're working on, among other things, this particular project.
Awesome.
So thanks, Robin. And
Thank you.
We're going to come see you in Vancouver soon, and maybe we'll have you on again before then.
Absolutely. All right.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.